Okay, we're ready to go into our very last session. It's been terrific, and that is the ending session before we go and celebrate Greek way in a Lebanese restaurant. It's been terrific conference, and I'm sure that you will agree. We did justice to the main theme at the beginning, although obviously we're all struggling to define what diaspora is and where to put it or not, but that's what we're here for. We discussed the diaspora-homeland relations, definitely in flux, and that's something that nobody, I think, can deny. We also, what was interesting for me as well, apart from the discussion of themes as academics and scholars, is also that we're talking about us in many ways as well, because we are also the object of our discussion and research. I often find myself answering the questions of all those questionnaires that we are putting up there. We've looked at figure and cases in our conference, and also we discussed homeland and state relations, and also what's been very important is this opportunity to socialize among each other, because now we know what we're doing, and we definitely have to follow up on all of this. And as the last session, and because this is also the tradition both of SEESOX, but also of the college, we always go with the question, what is to be done? How can we be relevant? We don't want to be there with our bubble, but try to be much more relevant to the reality. We've got here a number of initiatives. I don't know what to call them bottom up, but they are diasporic initiatives, whether we want to use the term or not. We will be, I asked all these participants here, the panelists, to present their own initiative a little bit in their work, and then we can have a broader discussion. We've got initiative relating to BrainGain, to diaspora and entrepreneurship, cultural diplomacy. Indeed, Dimitris was added at the last minute, and we're really thankful for this because he's been attending our conference, and our own academic work as well, because that's also very much an initiative. So we will start with Kalypso because she would like to make some points on this notion of what is to be done, and then we will proceed with the different initiatives and with our discussion.
Right. Well, thanks, and thanks everyone. What a fascinating 2-day conversation. And it's very clear in our conversation that we've been talking about a topic which is the relationship really between place and space, between location and connections. And so the most important answer to the question, what next, at the end of this conference is, when do we meet next, and how do we connect in between? And where do we meet next, right? So I think that we will owe you that, and it's really, important to make this promise. And we've talked about Athens, but this is also about the creation of a network of diaspora studies rather than diasporians, because I don't think we want to assume that every person studying the Greek diaspora is part of the Greek diaspora. Some of them are stayed in Greece, wow, how courageous, and others are not Greek at all, and how wonderful. But indeed, I just wanted to say one thing about the what next right now at 5 p.m., because after all, when we talk about location, you are perhaps in the most Greek city of the world, outside of Greece, and on top even of Melbourne or Chicago. And that's Oxford, and perhaps that's also why we're so comfortable here at SEESOX doing this exercise. And indeed, this is because, as you all know, this is the biggest departments of classics, studies of classics in the world, and the longest lasting. And so classics from Homerus to Byzantium. Well, we at Oxford, we've been trying at Oxford to say, hey, there's also modern Greece. We are in the here and now. But we sit on foundations. So one day I go and teach on, and when I said this is what next at 5 p.m., because I really do hope that those of you who don't know Oxford yet, or first time or whatever, you do go to the center. And you do see the Ashmolean when there's one of the biggest collection. When the Greek tomb of Olympus comes here, these are people who've worked together, archaeologists from here and Greece. When you go to the high street and you have people teaching ancient Greece to the biggest pool of students anywhere in the world, we have something like 35 teachers of ancient Greek language and civilization. Wow, amazing. And so we bring modernity to a place with these foundations, and you can go and see it. You can go to the Divinity School, the Bodleian Library, and you will see humanoris, and it will be Greek studies. And so I think it's important to know where we are. But what I'd like to say, beyond what I hope you can do, some of you between 5 and 7, is to kind of come back to what it means for us to be most of us academics, but then speaking also to people who bring their boots dirty, the panel today, who are going to share their wonderful projects. What is it to be academics for change? I like to think agents for change as academics. What is it to do something like transformative research? That's how I want to think of it. And indeed, with the challenge that when you do transformative research, you may be feeling part of something that you're trying to transform. But I'm part of other networks like, ASAP, Academic Stand Against Poverty. Well, this is a network of academics who try to always say very concretely and see how their study of poverty can alleviate poverty. So we need to be self-reflective about what is it we want to do. And we are, and I heard all over the room. And what I wanted to suggest, there are 3 categories for us to, when you do transformative research. You first witness what is, then you want to envision change, and thirdly, enact transformation. And I just want to throw at you some questions that arise in each of these categories, but they're all about what next. They're all about questions we want to ask together, right? So witnessing what is. How do we witness together? So, and there's, first you start with mapping. That's kind of what we do. But if we map, George just asked now, do we need to agree on the boundaries of our object, of our category, vis-a-vis migration and movement, etc.? What is at stake when we're confronting these definitions? And are we these Leibnizian monads who are defining our own personal boundaries, as it were, when we study and when we define the boundaries of who is part of the diaspora? And when we then do this comparatively, very interesting in the last panel, what about semantic nationalism? We invented the word diaspora. It's like we invented the word Europe, so we're part of it, So Greeks have a lot, obviously, of semantic nationalism. So what do we do with that? Are we that special a diaspora? What does that mean? So that's the kind of first moment of mapping. And then how do we connect our mapping exercise that are all idiosyncratic, right? First of all, diachronically. We talked yesterday about the problem of archives that, get flooded and lost and on fire. Now we're in the age of the internet, are we going to think really, really hard about archives? And we're people so how do we do this? And we've been thinking about the historical part, but there wasn't much today in this conference. So I think for what next, we need to come back to confronting and connecting the longue durée, across all our regions of the world. But of course, in all of the exercise that we've heard through the conference, there are all sorts of variants, if I can kind of use the methodological jargon, and patterns, across class, levels of skills, generations, etc., etc. So you're all studying different kinds of variants, and how do we cross them? It's not easy. And these are methodological questions, but there's a lot at stake here. And what about, I just said the internet, what about the use of new technology in mapping? So I'm not here, but 2 days ago I was talking with people working on technology and international relations. And, there are people who are starting to use smartphone to collect data of smartphone to map all the connections that people have with their host country and their home country, and how that correlates with levels of assimilation versus integration. But they use smartphone. And, there's all sorts of ethical questions. Let's come back to Cambridge Analytica. and we have the bad Cambridge Analytica, we have the good Oxford Analytica. So yes, but it raises a lot of issues about potential. Wow, the internet gives us completely new, and some of you were showing this, but how do we think about how we want to use these potentials to understand, to map? But then, of course, when you're doing this to still in witness what is, after mapping is understanding. These are deeper probes in reality. And we have these different realms of patterns. We have the movement, we have the settlement, and then we have the potential return. And interestingly, different scholars and analysts analyze these realms often separately. So how do you connect them? Should they be connected or not? What changes if you study them separately? And of course, we're talking about grand social sciencey questions of space and time here, because after all, diaspora study is all about the denial. We were talking about the distances with Australia. So you study, you deny space, but you also reassert the importance of space. How do you study that? And how do you resist the temptation when it comes to time of telling, how do you confront very different stories about the long shadow of memory? Yesterday we had fascinating conversations about that. But also in the grander analytical scheme, what are the foundational distinctions that we care the most about? Should we agree about them? So is it about the homeland versus the hostland and how they compare and contrast and in our minds and in the societal minds? Or is there a more fundamental distinction in the world, which is really between, I would think, between nomads and settlers? That's the history of civilization. And strangely enough, or fascinatingly enough, diasporas are both part of both these worlds. In fact, it's all about the journey between the world of nomads and the world of settlers. So it's about, and to some extent, a certain kind of embeddedness. And indeed, I think in our understanding, part of what emerges from our conversation is, yes, of course, there's a field of diaspora studies and comparative diaspora study and comparative Greek diasporas within the Greek diaspora. But of course, interestingly, the conversations we had show how we are embedded into different disciplines or realms of inquiry. And indeed, that diaspora bleeds into all other concepts, the overseas Chinese we were hearing, and studies of socialization, but also all the new stuff on networks. I'm sure many of you have read Victoria Bernal's book, Nations as Networks. So this kind of new boundary between studies of nationalism and networks, and there were discussions yesterday also about that. Obviously migration, but also in my field in IR, transnationalism, and new studies of transnationalism, especially transnational democracy. So we were talking about voting and all of that, and who is Greek, but that's embedded into this much kind of bigger discussion about how do you think about not just supranational democracy, there's an international organization, you plug into it, but horizontal, mutual entanglement kind of democracy. So we're, in this understanding, we're embedded in all of these realms. And of course, at the end of the day, beyond understanding, we have explaining and therefore predicting to some extent, although there's nothing harder to predict than the future, as we all know. And that's an interesting question as to when do we go from, in what next, how do we come to agree on explanations or confront our explanation, given that there are many scholars who work on the personal incentives. After all, diaspora is about individuals, Leibniz and monads. Surveys, immersion. Everyone loved René and Kira's, Rebetiko moment. Push and pull and all of that. And then the contextual structural variables, which belong kind of to other fields. And I personally believe that part of the conversation really has to be with putting those two sides together. And that's not easy, but sometimes they're very hard to confront. So that's just a number of questions which have to do with the first part, the kind of witnessing what is. Now, more quickly, envisioning change is the second category. And here I'll just very quickly ask questions about once you understand, we all envision what change should be. Should there be change at all? Change of diaspora as project, we asked this question yesterday, but if diaspora is actually beyond a realm or an object, it's a project, whose project it is? Whose project do we want it to be? Can we make a difference about whose project it is? And if it's about envisioning change in our minds and analytically and together, change from what? So we started this project as something called Homeland Ties in Times of Crisis, but actually we're all hoping to move beyond crisis. That's the whole point, right? Especially with the help of the diaspora. Now, so we're going to think homeland ties in steady state, homeland ties when nothing happens, homeland ties where humanity is happy. So what does the moment of crisis, which really is a big incentive for us in various ways, do to what we're trying to do? And simply in envisioning change, I also want to, one more question, last question, is the centered versus decentered. For me, is very important. Is it centered on Greece? What can you do for Greece? What do you think about Greece? Why you love Greece? And how the networks converge around Greece as the centered hub? Or are we at least as much and maybe more interested in all the horizontal connection between people across the world who happen to have some sort of connection to being Greek, one way or another? And that horizontality, for me, is at least as fascinating. How our friends from Australia studying a locality that will connect to friends from Argentina, that will connect with friends from California. Whoa, And that leads me to the last and third category after, what is envisioning change? Well, enacting transformation, and that will lead to our panel. And of course, we asked the question, as scholars, most of us in this room, well, there is a kind of blur between scholars, activists, and really hands-on professionals of various kinds, right? And so what should be the connection and the spectrum between policy, politics, and the personal, really? So part of what we are talking about has to do with policy advocacy. We all want to change the homeland and address all these, we can call them solidarity obstacles that give us headaches at night or during the day. And we all know them, and we've repeated them today. But then we have the problem, maybe I'll call it after Pavlos, the Halifax syndrome, that we're all mini viceroys telling Greece what to do, and that's not good either. So how do we negotiate this issue of advocacy from outside? And we're back to the transnational politics, the voting, etc. The second category, and I finish often, and that's what we're going to talk about now, is really empowerment. How is what we're doing about empowering groups in the diaspora, individuals, and national incarnation? Then, of course, the local level, and we talked about the local level, our students. We are about teaching, many of us. How do we empower our students? But also the global networks, and Nikos will talk about this. How do we think about empowerment? And for me, and I'll finish on this, what I like to think also in terms of empowerment is how do we create theaters of recognition where we live, where we are, or remotely, between people and peoples who don't necessarily understand or know each other, within the different bits and pieces of the diaspora that you've been exploring in so beautifully, or between those pieces and the outside world. Can we create theaters of recognition? What are the pitfalls? Isn't one last pitfall, or perhaps problem, is that, in the internet, we talk about the right to be forgotten. So let's not forget to ask whether some members of the diaspora don't always also want to claim the right to be forgotten and not be part of the diaspora at all anymore. One last question. These are just questions for you and for all of us later, but looking forward to hearing you.
Thank you very much, Kalypso. So you have 10 minutes each. And Nikos has 5 minutes because he had the opportunity yesterday to present his work. So you think about impact yourself. We start with Effie Kyrtata of Reload Greece. And we had the pleasure as SEESOX to cooperate with Reload Greece on 2 conferences so far. And we look forward to what Effie has to say.
Thank you, Alphonse.
Is it possible to switch the lights off so we can see the those lights?
Yes, we will. founder of Reload Greece.
Great. Thank you very much, Othon, Adonis, Fotini, the whole SEESOX team and the Greek Diaspora project. I'm delighted to be here and share more about my experience and Reload Greece as an initiative that we started back in 2012. So I've been in the UK for the past 10 years, living in London. I studied and then I started working and then worked full-time for Reload Greece when it started growing as an initiative. Over the past few years, we've seen a lot of young people leave Greece because of the crisis to find a better opportunity here in the UK. And that was something that really affected us in 2012, seeing so many young people leaving. And being part of that brain drain, we thought, what is it practically that we can do, being in the UK, to connect ourselves with Greece in a very meaningful way? And we thought we had two options. So option number one would be to collect, do a crowdfunding campaign to raise funding for people who had great need, hospitals, young children who were in great need of the funding for schools, for heat, and all the different great problems that Greece has been facing. And the other is a more long-term view, which is creating a sustainable future in some way for Greece by activating the diaspora in a with a more longer-term view. So focusing on the latter, we thought, why don't we engage the diaspora by creating a platform whereby they can use entrepreneurship as a vehicle and as a tool to start businesses around the world, but which have a social and economic impact back home. And this is what we tried to do. So Reload Greece became a registered UK charity, which has a mission to enable a new generation of entrepreneurs to start businesses that have a social and economic impact in their home country. And we're starting from Greece, from the Greek example, but we think that our model can be adapted for many other countries as well. How we're doing it is we have three main pillars of activity. One is we are activating the diaspora community, focusing on young people who want to start a business around the world, but enabling them to create an impact back home through our educational content and material. And by that, we have a pool of around 120 mentors who are senior members of the diaspora who we train to help the younger generation to start businesses that make an impact back home. And this is the second pillar. We use connected business models whereby through our methodology and our education, you can connect your business back home in different ways. So you can shift part of your manufacturing in Greece, although your base is in the UK. Or you can hire young people in Greece, although you're based in the UK or in other countries. And vice versa. If you're based in Greece, you can connect to the UK to get funding or get mentoring and support and broaden your horizons and know how you can target the rest of the world and not just Greece and create extroverted businesses. So we're creating this bridge between Greece and the rest of the world. And number three, our focus is to, through our programs, develop sustainable ventures, i.e. not ventures that just survive for 1 or 2 years, but that really create an impact back home. And for this, we focus on businesses that have potential to be scalable and sustainable and create more than 50 jobs. How we implement these three pillars is through our educational programs and activities. So number one is we have our Thought Leadership Conference, which Othon mentioned that we've collaborated with for the past 2 years. And that is how Reload Greece started in 2012 with a big conference in London to bring the community together. And now it's going to happen this year for its 5th year on the 6th of October, and you're all invited. And in this Thought Leadership Initiative, we showcase the best examples that Greece has to offer and find and highlight other countries as well and the way that they have activated the diaspora. So we've had examples from Israel, from Estonia, and from many different other countries. Secondly, we have programs that help early stage entrepreneurs, and with that, we reach out to 14 different universities in the UK, run local workshops, and activate young people in order to start businesses that have a connection to Greece. And last year we piloted the program in Munich, and next year we want to go to Berlin as well in Germany in the Netherlands and the States, and also looking to expand and collaborate with Greek universities to make this program much, much bigger. Through that, we educate around 1,000 people per year. We select the best ideas, around 12. Then they go through a fast-track acceleration with a mentor community that we connect them with. And then the best ideas move on to the Reload Greece Challenge, which is an intense accelerator program where we help entrepreneurs get their first round of investment and really solidify their business plans and create the sustainable ventures that I mentioned before. The Pre-RD Challenge is a bespoke program that we have added, which is much smaller training, helping Greek teams internationalize their business models. So with this, we're building cross-country connections between, firstly, the UK and Greece, and this is how we started, but now we're looking to expand Reload Greece's impact across different countries as well as the organization is growing. And so far, we have educated throughout our programs more than 4,000 young people. We've accelerated more than 85 companies that have a connection to Greece, which have raised more than 3 million in funding and have created more than 130 jobs, 70% of which are in Greece. And as I mentioned, it has been quite of a journey so far. We started in 2012 as a volunteer-led initiative when we were studying and we were just a group of friends. But then slowly we caught the attention of a professor at London Business School, Nicolaidis, who actually really helped us solidify our plan and our strategy of what the organization aims to do, what our mission should be, and the educational curriculum of the different programs that we run. And we started running local workshops, which then developed to the Young Entrepreneurs Program. Then when in 2014, when Greece was again in the press, we thought we have to do something now for Greek teams to internationalize, and we created the first version of the Reload Greece Challenge, which became now our flagship accelerator. And so from one step to the next, this has created kind of a ripple effect to grow the organization to where we're now. Where we are now outside of the London Business School, have a team of more than 150 volunteers who have been very important to our work, and we are 3 full-time members and around 4 part-time working on Reload Greece. And a few examples of the type of connection we're working towards building. For example, Workathlon is a business that joined our accelerator program last year. They are a platform that helps hotel chains hire people in the hospitality industry. Katerina joined our program, the accelerator, in the UK. She's based in Athens, where she went through the acceleration, the very intense program of 9 days, and then she met investors, raised her first round of investment, has hired more than 7 people now in Greece, and one of her mentors is now a member of the board of Workathlon, so she's growing her company in Greece, yet with an international perspective. The other is Push Me. It's George Kaligeros came at one of our local workshops at Bath University when we ran the Young Entrepreneurs Program. He was working on a device to electrify bicycle fleet, and he graduated from the Young Entrepreneurs Program, got into the accelerator, and raised funding, went in California in one of the best accelerators and in China, and through an innovation tour we run with our partners in Greece, he's now shifting part of his manufacturing in Greece, yet his base is not necessarily in Athens, and he's growing his team very, very well. Another more social example is GiveMed, who also joined our accelerator program, who have a great social impact in Greece. They met and got connected with their mentors, 2 of which are on their board now, based in the UK, and now he's based in Greece and has redistributed more than 6,000 medicine to people in need through his social pharmacies, creating a social impact in Greece. And the 4th is an example of someone who joined our programs in 2014, which shows the point of sustainability. So we're really following up on the ideas to show that they're growing year on year. And now this is a platform which is helping and enabling couples from around the world to book their wedding via town halls straight away. And Maria has actually raised her first round of investment, has hired 15 people in Greece and Cyprus, and has completed more than 3,000 bookings of couples internationally who can now get married in Greece straight away, although before it was very difficult to do that via the town halls. So this just gives you an idea and a flavor of the type of connection we're working towards building. At first it may not be so evident what type of connection you can have, yet there is a very important and a very easy way in which you can connect to your home country, and we're hoping that through the Reload Greece platform and network and community, we can facilitate these connections. I mentioned this story briefly before, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Effie, and congratulations on your initiative. And I think your presentation tied very well with the skeleton that and the questions that Kalypso raised, and how also you enacted your transformation in the end, and what wonderful impact you've been having. We had a session on brain drain, so let's see how you view BrainGain.
Hi everyone, I'm Nikos Theodorakis. I'm a lawyer by profession and I'm also a lecturer here at Oxford. However, I'm here with another hat, that one of an NGO, the BrainGain. First of all, let me thank everyone at SEESOX for organizing this wonderful conference. Othon, Fotini, Manolis, Antonis. It's a great pleasure to be here, and I've learned a lot today, so it's been really great. First of all, let me tell you about who we are. BrainGain is an initiative that kicked off in Christmas of 2015. Actually, it started, I was back in Athens. It was, the Christmas holidays. We're around a family table with family friends, and we're talking about all the pathogenies of the country, what needs to change, what we don't like about the country. And at some point, we had some glass of wine, some tsikoudia. We're like, okay, now let's go to bed. Because that's what we usually do. We discuss about things that we don't like, and then we just go to bed, and the next morning we just wake up and it's another day. And we're like, no, let's try and do something about that. Let's try and change the things that we don't like. And that's how we start with the BrainGain initiative. We're people from all over the world, so the founding members were back then based in Brussels, Oxford, New York, Dubai, Australia, so literally all over the world. As things stand, we have around 5,000 members. We have a few hundreds of volunteers in different hubs in our main cities of operations, which are London, Brussels, and DC, as things stand. And as our name kind of denotes, what we try to do is we try to reverse the brain drain and lead to a brain gain. Now, we try to do that through a number of ways that I'm going to discuss in a minute. But let me first tell you what we're trying to do. The first thing is that we're trying to reverse brain drain in the sense that if someone wants to come back home, that they can do that with dignity. We try to create the circumstances and the conditions so that if people want to repatriate, they can do that, and they don't necessarily need to sacrifice, for example, a huge part of the salary or their life conditions in their current country in which they reside. To us, going back should be a pleasant experience. It shouldn't be seen as a trauma that actually is going to be a huge sacrifice for me. At the same time, we're not saying that everyone should go back, right? We believe in the citizen of the world aspect. We believe in cosmopolitanism. We believe that everyone should be allowed to stay wherever they want. Which means that in case people don't want to come back, that's perfectly fine. We still try to connect them. We try to connect the Greek diaspora through a number of initiatives to make sure that these people can also contribute to the country if they so wish, through a number of ways, through their ideas, through their capital, labor capital or human capital, and they can actually help the country back on its feet. Now, why do we want to do that? For obvious reasons. First of all, because we love our country, because we think that it's really important if some people want to go back to have great prospects in coming back to the country. We also want for people to ideally restore the connection that they have with the motherland. What we experienced, and I personally experienced when I left the country back in 2009, is that many people were very angry. When they left, at least in the first few years, they were very angry at Greece. They didn't want to even go back for holidays. And we still see that. I mean, most of us live abroad, and we have several stereotypes that are circulated from within the Greek community. So we try to fix that, and we think it's really important that even if you decide to stay abroad for the rest of your life, to have a good connection with your motherland. We also want, as an NGO, to contribute to the structural reforms happening and that are supposed to happen in Greece. In essence, we're saying that we want to achieve a revolution of what is kind of given, right? It's a given that we need to change many things in the country. It's a given that the bureaucracy needs to change. It's a given that corruption is one of the main problems of Greece. This is, of course, These are, of course, ideas that have been circulating for many decades. I realize that we're not reinventing the wheel here, but we do think that it's really important to try and step in and say that, okay, as young Greeks, as young scientists, this is what we will try to do to fix things. Now, how do we do that? We have a number of ways through which we try to achieve our institutional goals. The first one is through surveys. So what we do all those opinion polls. We've done 4 so far. They're open to the public. We try to abide by as many research and methodological standards as possible. Of course, we do not claim that they are as sound surveys as if they were under a full-blown academic scrutiny. However, they are useful in trying to see what people are thinking at a given point in time. Our first study, and let me say that all those studies have been completed by around 5,000 to 8,000 participants, this, depending on the study. The first one tried to see why did people leave the country. And we're talking about people who left the country mostly after 2007, 2008. And of course, as you expect, the findings were pretty intuitive in the sense that most people left the country because they wanted something better for their career, because they felt that the bureaucracy and the conditions in the country were quite bad, so they needed a change. Our second study tried to map whether they would return back home and what are the conditions under which those young Greeks would return. I find that to be a quite interesting study for a number of reasons. First of all, because the majority of the participants said that they haven't been abroad for way too many years. 55% of the participants back then had been abroad for up to 5 years. We then see a correlation between the number of years that people are abroad and their willingness to come back in the country if certain things change. So the more years they stay abroad, the less likely it is that they will return, even if things get quite better. The cutoff point is in around 5 to 8 years. At least from our studies, we see that after the 8th year of someone staying abroad, it's more unlikely than likely that they will come back. Another finding that we find quite interesting is that a vast majority said that they would come back even with less money and with quite less money. Of course, salary is an important factor when one decides whether they reside in a certain country. However, again, around 60% of the participants said that they would be willing to have up to 40% less salary than they currently have, and they will still come back in the country, provided, again, that other things change. So we see a pattern that it's more about the structural reforms that need to be made rather than the salary per se. Only 7% of the participants said that they would never come back to Greece, no matter what. And 55% of the participants said that they would come back to Greece within 1 or 2 years if some of those things would get better, if the bureaucracy would get better, if there is stability and security. Actually, this was a recurring pattern. People feel very unsafe in Greece. They feel that they may pay a different tax this year and another tax the year after. They want to plan their future. They want to know what's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. So that's a crucial finding. Another research had to do with Brexit, actually, and whether the Greeks of the UK are concerned about the Brexit. And we made a number of suggestions to the Greek government with regard to that and with regard to how our negotiating position through the EU towards the UK should be with regard to Brexit. Approximately 40 to 45% of the participants said that, of course, who are UK residents, said that they are concerned about the Brexit and whether this would mean that they would need to relocate at some point. And then our last study had to do with whether those people would come back and whether they would be willing to work as a civil servant. This was in connection to a declaration made by the Greek government with regard to giving incentives to young Greeks to come back and work in the civil sector. Only 20% of the Greeks said that they would actually be willing to come back to work as civil servants. So that's the first leg of activities through which we try to promote our goals. The second leg of activity is through best practices. We have a number of different professionals in many different areas. We have lawyers, we have academics, engineers, doctors, so on and so forth. So what we try to do is we categorize them by profession and then by geographic region, and we have created a number of best practices and policy documents that we have then forwarded to all the parties of Greece. to the government and all the opposition parties. The first policy document that we drafted had to do with the right to vote. We've discussed that during the day. Essentially, we did a comparative legal research on constitutional law and what is the case in all the other EU member states and under what conditions can their citizens who are living abroad permitted to vote. We then forwarded those findings again to the government and to all the parties actually. We received very positive feedback from all the opposition. The government at the moment at least is not in favor of that proposal. At the same time, we are drafting a number of best practices documents for several sectors. One of them has to do with the judicial system. So for example, again, we're trying to find ways through which we can restructure, we can reform our judicial system in a way that it won't necessarily cost money, but if we manage to do that, it's really going to benefit the economy and the society altogether. For example, through introducing ways of alternative dispute resolution, which we have been trying to do for several years, and now it's slowly starting to, we're slowly starting to catch up in Greece. However, we're not really there. We're also trying to connect Greeks abroad with a number of opportunities from companies that are in Greece. It's either multinational companies or startups that want specialized workforce of Greeks who have been working abroad, and they're willing to give them greater benefits than if they were to be hired straight from working in the country. So we are, when such opportunity arises, we have a network of companies, of enterprises, of startups that connect with us and they say, hey, we want to hire an X person with 3 years of engineering experience in the UK. So we send that to our network and we connect them. And we have had quite a successful track record so far. The last thing that we do, and it's something that we have recently started doing because it relates to the emotional side of Diaspora, is we have started to present a number of other great initiatives who have also been doing that. We've started connecting, presenting stories of Greeks who have been living abroad. We have presenting their stories in the sense of what they've learned by being abroad and what they want to change. So it's all connected to the BrainGain initiative. And we have a set of questions which were like, I left Greece because X, I would come back if X. So we are geared towards A, explaining the causes that really led people leaving the country, and B, trying to dissect and formulate specific proposals through which Greeks could come back. And again, it's not an issue of money, it's an issue of actual initiative, it's an issue of trying to reflect the change also individually and through social networks. And as a last comment, when we were at that dinner table in Athens, that Christmas of 2015, one of the main things that we discussed was that at the end of the day, if you don't do something, or you individually, then nothing will change. And I think that one of the main issues with the Greek crisis is that at least many people of my generation feel that the game is lost. So like, there's nothing you can do, just leave this country and never come back. And I disagree with that. I think that it is up to us individually and then collectively to create and then cause and generate the revolution of the given, in a way. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Nikos. Now we move to Dimitris. They've recently also inaugurated their strategy in London 2 weeks ago, the Hellenic Initiative of Cultural Diplomacy, which is not just about Rebetica that we have been discussing during the last 2 days, but a bit wider than that.
Hello everyone, thank you all, and thank you to the SEESOX team for asking me to say a few words about this new initiative, and thank you for organizing this great conference. I have been asked to present the Hellenic Institute of Cultural Diplomacy just 10 minutes before the beginning of this panel, so I don't have any PowerPoint presentation, haven't even brought my jacket. So I'm just going to say 2 words about this, and then we'll have the time to discuss later on. My name is Dimitrios Graniotis. I'm the director and founder of Arc for Art, which, as we say, promotes and rebrands Greece and Greek culture abroad, mainly by doing events related to arts and theater and many other cultural events. But today I'm here with my cultural diplomacy hat to present the Hellenic Institute of Cultural Diplomacy in the UK. The Hellenic Institute of Cultural Diplomacy in Greece was founded last year in March, and it is a non-governmental independent organization with a dual aim, which I'm gonna tell a bit more later. There are lots of branches in Greece and abroad, and last month we launched our own Hellenic Institute of Cultural Diplomacy in the UK at UCL. So as an institute, we have lots of scientists and academics and professionals in different fields such as arts and theater and gastronomy, opera, academia, and many more. And we have a dual vision to promote and develop cultural diplomacy academically with conferences, discussions, and events, and to create an intercultural dialogue in different fields such as arts, theater, opera, gastronomy, ecclesiastical diplomacy, and more. And at the same time, through all of these events, shift the perceptions of Greece abroad by fostering a move from the reproduction of our heritage, which, as we said before, it's very important, to the promotion of Greek contemporary culture. And I'm going to give you some examples of things that we would like to focus on. Just going to read through a list which is not exhaustive. That would be the creation and promotion of Hellenic culture abroad, the enhancement of the image and public perception of the cultural diplomacy's role, the education and training of executive servicing cultural diplomacy in any way, the research, documentation, and public disclosure of cultural growth issues, the support and global promotion of the Hellenic cultural heritage, the organization of conferences, events, seminars, discussions, and exhibitions, and publication of research projects, the establishment and financial support of the promotion of creators and their works, as well as other academic publications, and many more. So this is in a few words some things that we would like to do. We just started, and we are open to ideas and synergies and collaborations. I think this is the way forward, as all of the other speakers said, and I'm not going to steal more time from the panel members, and I would be happy to chat and answer to any of your questions. Thank you.
A few minutes for Nikos, and then we can open it up.
Phew. All right, so hello again. I'm not going to present any PowerPoint or anything this time, just a quick recap on what New Diaspora is and what New Diaspora aims to be. First of all, we recently did a survey, a questionnaire actually, not a proper survey, on the Macedonian name issue, just because out of curiosity what our audience thinks about. With this survey, we have the opportunity to ask them a couple of things about themselves. So we discovered that with about 200 respondents, the main age categories 70% below 40. 16% are 29 years old, and 53% 30 to 39 years old. And as far as the educational level is concerned, we have an impressive 53% that hold the postgraduate degree, and around 14% PhD holders, which means that basically almost everybody has some sort of higher education. And the vast majority, also 62%, work as salaried employees, which is very broad, of course, could be scientists or any other field, with only about 14% being freelancers, 9% of them, of the respondents in the questionnaire, being students, and around 6% unemployed, 5% entrepreneurs, and 4% other. So that's just to give you an idea of what our main audience consists of, which has been also identified by Facebook and Google Analytics and other ways of cross-checking. Few more things is that, okay, New Diaspora in the last 5 years has become both a participatory source of global content that relates to the Greek diaspora, the Greek migration flow, the new one, its causes, its consequences, and its future. And at the same time, a point of reference and social synergy that encourages its members to connect, exchange ideas, collaborate, and pursue common goals. The next step is to define further what this group, which, as I said yesterday, is a very diverse group of people, what exactly are its nuances here and there regarding consumer habits or cultural identity, etc. In order to be able to target further and connect in more specific ways. Our philosophy is not to try and do everything by ourselves. We like to have affiliations with groups, institutions, anybody who's on the same path with us, and anybody who's willing and able to address this group of people and to do something actual about it. So we already have a collaboration with Reload Greece, and we're going to be enhancing that. We already have a collaboration, well, we're starting a collaboration with the Hellenic Institute of Cultural Diplomacy, with SEESOX on an academic level, etc., etc. So, and with lots of other smaller groups and institutions. We're not competitive, that we don't really see that we have competitors in any way. In order to empower Greek neo-migrants and bridge the gap between them and their homeland, apart from telling stories and trying to film more documentaries, we have a number of complementary sub-projects that we would like to participate together with others, such as the interactive map that the Greek Diaspora Project is preparing, agenda of commercial, cultural, academic events abroad on a global level, repatriation incentives, which could be from job listings or state and international funds, like for research purposes or whatever. Peer-reviewed work groups focusing on change, on socio-economic change. The voting rights campaign, which before even New Diaspora started, back in 2012, we were the first ones to do the I Cannot Vote.org, it still exists, I think, the website, I Cannot Vote campaign, which had a video of like a minute or something, of different people from different nationalities, basically saying that I'm Peruvian, French, Brazilian, whatever, and I can vote from abroad, and the Greek person at the end said, I cannot vote from abroad. To raise awareness and gather signatures. Okay. So, the long-term ambition is that we can facilitate the emergence of global think tank and network that can become a launchpad of ideas and values, as well as a real-time incubator of potential solutions for the challenging times of Greek and European historical developments. And I would also like to ask a couple of questions, but I don't think I can, I will be...
Of course we do. We just by opening
okay.
this up now.
Let's open the floor to the
we'll
question
close
then.
it off.
Thank you.
So,